All right. We'll try it one more time. Give me just 1 second, everyone. 1 second. Doopity-doo, doopity-doo, doopity-doopity-doo. All right. I have to delete my previous little coffee because it immediately failed. All right, good. Okay, we're back. I think we're back. Listen, I'm not in charge of the internet here, Bahamar. It's been cutting in and out on my computer and other people's computers. Seems to work on our phones, though. I don't know why. But we're back. If it drops again, I'm not going to sit here and deal with dropping internet. And we're going to move on with our lives. Okay, today, I want to talk about swings. Swings are fun. Swings that most people are concerned with typically go in the downward direction. They like to publicize the upward direction of swings, but they don't really think about the downward direction of swings. But they do realize it happens because it does happen to you, right? So, first things first, skill level. If you are more skilled than your opponents, and you know this with a reasonably high amount of certainty, then you will very likely not worry so much about downswings or upswings. You just realize you are printing your equity. Whenever you play, you win your equity, assuming you play a lot of hands. You play long term, right? If you play once a week, you may realize you're winning, but you will have swings over each week and over years because you're not playing very much poker. And that's okay. You have to understand that, right? You need to understand what you were signed up for and the game that you are playing. So, that's also important, right? You need to understand what you signed up for. Most people, almost all people actually, who play poker tournaments don't quite realize what they signed up for. They think they're supposed to cash 1 in 8 tournaments. And that's as far as they think. They think if I play 8 tournaments, I will get a cash. Right? And no, that's not how it works. You can go many tournaments with no cashes, and you can go many tournaments with lots of cashes. I mean, sometimes you're lucky and sometimes you're not lucky is what it amounts to. For example, I've had twice in my live tournament career where I've went 40 tournaments in a row and no cashes. Sounds like a lot, right? But if you talk to any pro who plays a lot, they've all had the same results, assuming they're playing relatively high stakes. Now, if you're playing small stakes against bad players with poor structures, which means you're just straight up flipping more often, then you won't have quite as bad of droughts. But if you're playing against very good players, where sometimes you may not have the edge, then you will have longer droughts. Actually, I'm not sure if that's a true statement. It may not be true, because if you're playing in poor structures, inevitably you will just go on downswings too. So it more depends on your edge. If you have a bigger edge in any game, then you should have positive expectations. Now, maybe what I'm implying here with my statement is that perhaps I was playing without an edge for a while. Maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. It's tough to say. But if you're playing without an edge, you're going to go on way worse downswings if you're playing with an edge. Now, I'm going to make the perhaps egotistical assumption that I've played with an edge throughout my entire career in almost all spots. There are times where I'm pushing it, like if you're playing a $100,000 buy-in tournament. That says I game select very hard whenever I'm playing the upper buy-in games. Typically, if I'm playing a 25K or higher, I'm usually game selecting it to some extent, by the way, just for all of you to know about me. And that's because that's where it starts to push the top of the bankroll, right? You want to make sure you're playing with 100 buy-ins or more. And, well, let's know about my net worth a little bit, I guess. So, anyway, whenever you are playing, if you do have an edge, you should be reasonably confident and not worry so much about the downswings because you know you have an edge. Now, how can you know you have an edge? That's the hard thing. Because, especially in live poker, your results are not indicative or are marginally indicative of your actual skill level. There are many players who win the first few tournaments they play, or, they play 20 tournaments, they win 2 of them, they think they're the best poker player ever, and they go on and they just lose all their money. So how are they going about losing all their money if they are the greatest player ever? Well, they just think they're the greatest player ever because they've played 20 tournaments. They don't understand the game they signed up for. This is why it's very important to understand what you signed up for. There's a site what's it called? I'm forgetting off the top of my head. They have a tournament variance calculator or a simulator on their site where basically you can say, all right, let me play 1,000 games of tournaments with X buy-in, with X return on investment, with X number of players, and simulate the swings over 1,000 games. And they'll simulate, however many thousands of games you tell them to simulate. They can do a 1,000 game sample 20 times. And you'll see, sometimes you just win all the money. Usually, you win a little bit of money. And sometimes you lose a little bit of money. Which means, and this is quite scary, that you can play 1,000 tournaments and lose money. Now, how many tournaments are 1,000 tournaments? Well, if you play one a week, it's 52 a year. It means it'll take you 20 years to play 1,000 tournaments. If you're a recreational player, once a week, which is how much most people play. So if you're playing once a week, you could go on a 20-year downswing, and it is normal. Assuming you're playing in rather large field tournaments. Now, that may or may not be the case for you. As you're playing smaller fields, you'll have less variance, which leads to smaller downswings and smaller upswings. Are you saying smaller stakes tournaments have more high variance structures? Typically, yes. Not necessarily, but typically. Essentially, the shorter the tournament takes to complete, the less time good players have to extract value from the bad players, right? Also, the shorter stacks that you have, often that leads to mistakes being smaller in terms of big blinds. If you only have 5 big blinds, you can't make that big of a mistake in terms of big blinds. But in general, the faster the tournament, the worse structure. Now, there are some $200 tournaments that take 2 or 3 days, and those have good structures, and you're good to go. But in general, as the blind levels go up faster, as they start you with fewer big blinds, etc., that leads to smaller edges. And typically, small stakes tournaments have worse structures because they're not charging you a whole lot of money to play, right? I mean, they're not going to let you sit in their casino for 2 days for $20 a break. It's not how they do it. Online, quite often, smaller stakes tournaments have fine structures because it costs the sites not a whole lot of money. But then, they also have turbos. A lot of sites are trying to move people into turbos. Why? Because no one's winning. If no one's winning, that's good for the site. All right, so downswings. What else we need to talk about? Bankroll. One thing I found that's been very beneficial for me, personally, is the idea that if I keep a big bankroll, I don't really care about the downswings as much. Let's say you have $10,000 to your name, and there's a $3,500 tournament coming up next week at your local casino, and you're debating whether or not you should play it. Well, most people say, well, do you have $3,500? You do. You have $10,000. So you should play it. Especially if you think you have an edge, right? Well, the answer is probably not. And the reason for that is because if you lose, now instead of having $10,000, you have $6,500, which definitely impacts your potential profitability. Am I in Baja Mar? I am. I'm playing day 2A. It starts in a few hours. I'm going to do this little coffee. I'm going to go swim in the ocean for a little bit, and then I'm going to go find some food, and then I'm going to go play day 2. You're in day 2 as well, I presume. Maybe, maybe not. Good luck. Come say hi if you see me. Come say hi when you see me, because I will be there. All right. PokerCoaching.com seems to be more oriented towards tournaments. Well, we're actually having more cash game quizzes coming out, but currently most of the quizzes are based on tournaments. But understand that tournaments and cash games are not that different, and we have tons of deep stack quizzes. Deep stack tournaments and deep stack cash games are almost identical. Colin says, you tend to look at how many mistakes people are making that you wouldn't mind playing against. It's hard to know without playing with the same field for a while. Yeah, even then, though, like yesterday in the 5K, I saw people making just horrific mistakes over and over and over again. They were, calling 3-bets with king jack offsuit out of position. There's stuff like that, right? If you see that happen one time, you just know they're making significant mistakes. And they were. It didn't help me. I lost every flip. What happened is I would grind up my 1 million stack to like 1.8 million, get it all in for 800K or something, and lose a flip. That happened 3 times. And then I lost the last one right at the end of the day. I had ace-king against 6s. Rough day from yesterday. Let's talk about my day yesterday. Yesterday, I started day 3 of the $25,000 tournament with $75,000 in equity, 3 starting stacks. We were near the money, so I'm kind of likely to collect. We needed a third of the field to leave. I was probably 40% to bust before getting in the money, if I had to guess, on average. Just because I was not in the top 66% of the field. I was in the bottom third. So, obviously, I'm more likely to go broke than people who have a lot of chips. And, I got it all in at a pretty standard spot and I lost. So, fine. Okay, there goes $75,000 in equity we started with. Whew, bye-bye. Then, we bought into the $5,000 tournament. We immediately doubled up just by winning lots of hands. I was pushing around the table a bit. There was one hand where I raised to like 22,000. Someone called big blind 3-bet to 100,000. I called with ace queen of clubs out of a million chips. It comes jack 10 4, 2 clubs. He checked. I bet. He called. Turn was an 8, giving me double gut shot. He checked. I jammed all in for 1.5 times pot. He snap folded kings face up. That was good for me.